The river was rising fast, and Elena Marsh was already soaked to the bone when she heard the sound that changed her life. It was not a scream. It was worse than a scream. It was a low, broken howl that cracked in the middle, as if something huge and strong was trying to hold on, and failing. Elena stopped walking. Rain hit her face in sharp little needles, and the wind pulled at her jacket like it wanted to throw her into the water too. She looked toward the sound and saw a shape in the river. Gray fur, a massive body, twice the size of any dog she had ever seen, spinning helplessly in the current. Blood spread out around it in the water, thin red ribbons that the storm tried to wash away as fast as they appeared. Elena did not think. She dropped her bag on the muddy bank and ran toward the water. Her mind screamed at her to stop. She was 26 years old, a veterinary student who had grown up in this small mountain town, and she knew rivers like this one could kill a grown man in minutes. The current near the bend was fast enough to break bones against the rocks. She knew all of this, and she jumped in anyway. The cold hit her like a wall. For a moment, her whole body locked up, and she could not breathe. She forced her arms to move, forced her legs to kick, and fought her way toward the gray shape that was now only a few feet away, sinking lower into the water with every second. "Hold on," she said, though she knew an animal could not understand her words. "Hold on, please." Her fingers closed around thick, wet fur. The wolf was enormous, far bigger than any wolf she had studied in her classes, with a body that felt like solid muscle, even as it grew weaker in her arms. There was a deep wound along its side, torn and ugly, and blood kept coming no matter how the rain tried to wash it clean. Elena wrapped one arm around the animal's neck and used the other to pull them both toward the bank. The current fought her every second. Rocks scraped her legs. Water filled her mouth and she spat it out and kept swimming, kept pulling, kept refusing to let go. When her knees finally hit solid ground, she almost cried from relief. She dragged the wolf up onto the muddy bank, out of the reach of the hungry water, and collapsed beside it, gasping for air. The wolf's chest rose and fell in shallow, painful breaths. Elena pressed both hands against the wound on its side, the same way she had been trained to stop bleeding in her classes, though nothing in those classes had prepared her for an animal this large, this strange. Then the wolf opened its eyes. Elena froze. She had looked into the eyes of hundreds of animals in her short career. Dogs and cats and horses and one very grumpy goat that had bitten her twice. She had never seen eyes like these. They were gray, almost silver, and they looked at her with something she could only describe as understanding. Not the blank stare of an animal in pain, something closer to a person trying to speak without a voice. "It's okay," she whispered, though her hands were shaking now, and not just from the cold. "I've got you. I'm not going to let you die out here." The wolf's eyes stayed locked on hers for a long moment. Then, slowly, the lids grew heavy, and the great body went still beneath her hands. "No," Elena said, pressing harder. "No, no. Stay with me. Stay awake." She had no equipment, no supplies, nothing but her jacket, which she tore off and pressed against the wound as tightly as she could. The storm did not care about her efforts. Thunder rolled across the mountains, and the rain fell harder, and somewhere in the dark forest behind her, she thought she heard something moving, something large, something that was not the wind. She looked over her shoulder, and saw nothing but trees, swaying violently in the wind. Still, the feeling did not leave her, the feeling of being watched from somewhere in the black trees, and she found herself talking to the wolf again, just to fill the silence, just to keep herself from feeling so alone out here in the storm. "My house isn't far," she said. "Maybe half a mile. If I can get you there, I can help you properly. I have supplies. I have a heat lamp. I have everything I need. I just need you to hold on a little longer." The wolf did not answer, of course. It could not answer. But its chest still moved, faint and shallow, and that was enough to give Elena the strength to try. She could not carry an animal this size on her own, not through half a mile of storm and mud. So she did the only thing she could think of. She found a fallen branch, wide and flat, half rotted, but still solid enough to hold weight, and she rolled the wolf onto it, as gently as she could. Then she began to drag. It was the hardest thing she had ever done. Every muscle in her body screamed in protest. Her legs, already weak from the swim, threatened to give out with every step. The rain turned the ground to slick mud that pulled at her boots and made each step a battle. But she kept going, one foot in front of the other, her eyes fixed on the distant lights of her house, glowing faintly through the storm like a promise she refused to break. Halfway there, she heard the sound again, not the wolf's howl this time, something else. A low growl, coming from somewhere in the trees to her left, deep and steady, like a warning. Elena's blood went cold. She turned her head slowly, half afraid of what she might see, but the darkness gave up nothing. No shape, no eyes glowing in the rain. Just trees, bending and groaning in the wind. "Stay back," she said into the darkness, her voice shaking but firm. "I don't know what you are, but stay back." The growl did not come again. Whatever had made the sound seemed to be waiting, watching, deciding something. Elena did not wait to find out what. She gripped the branch tighter and pulled harder, forcing her aching body forward until her house finally rose out of the storm in front of her, small and warm and safe. Getting the wolf up the porch steps took everything she had left. By the time she pushed open her front door and pulled the animal inside, out of the rain at last, her arms felt like they belonged to someone else. She collapsed onto the floor, beside the massive, unmoving body, chest heaving, rain and river water pooling around them both on the wooden floor. For a moment, she simply lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince her lungs to work properly again. Then she remembered the wound, and she forced herself back onto her knees. The bleeding had slowed, but it had not stopped. Elena crawled to the cabinet where she kept her veterinary supplies, things she had gathered over years of working with the local animal clinic, and pulled out everything she thought might help: gauze, disinfectant, a sedative, in case the animal woke up and panicked, though some instinct told her that would not happen, that this wolf understood, somehow, that she was trying to help. She cleaned the wound as carefully as she could, her hands steady now despite the cold and the fear, years of training taking over where fear tried to creep in. The cut was deep, deeper than she had first realized, and it looked less like something made by rocks in a river, and more like something made by claws, or a blade. That thought made her pause. She looked at the wound again, studying the edges, the depth, the pattern. It did not look like an accident. It looked like something had tried, very deliberately, to kill this animal. "Who did this to you?" she whispered. The wolf, of course, said nothing, but its breathing had grown steadier now, and when Elena finally finished wrapping the wound in clean bandages, she noticed something strange. The fur around the injury seemed to be knitting itself together faster than it should, faster than any healing she had ever studied, as if the animal's body was fighting back against the damage with a strength that defied everything she knew about biology. She told herself it was exhaustion. She told herself the storm and the cold and the fear had made her imagination run wild, and that no animal healed that quickly, no matter how strong it looked. But some small part of her, the part that had felt those silver eyes staring into hers, was not so sure. Elena spent the rest of the night beside the wolf, wrapped in a blanket, feeding the fire in her small living room to keep them both warm. She did not sleep, not really. Every time her eyes grew heavy, she would jerk awake again, checking the wolf's breathing, checking the bandages, listening to the storm outside and wondering, again and again, about that growl in the trees. Sometime near dawn, exhaustion finally won. Elena's eyes closed, and she did not fight it this time. Her last thought, as sleep pulled her under, was of those silver eyes, and the strange, impossible feeling that something enormous had just changed in her life, though she could not have said what. She woke to sunlight. It took her a moment to understand what was wrong. The storm was gone. Sunlight poured through her windows in warm golden bars, and she was lying not on the floor, but in her own bed, tucked under blankets she did not remember pulling over herself. Her clothes had been changed. She was warm, dry, and completely confused. She sat up too quickly, and her head spun. Memories from the night before came rushing back. The river, the wolf, the long, painful walk home. She threw off the blankets and hurried out of her bedroom, her heart pounding, expecting to find the wolf exactly where she had left it, in front of the dying fire. Instead, she found a man sitting at her kitchen table. Elena stopped in the doorway, frozen. The man was tall, with broad shoulders and dark hair that looked like it had not been cut in months. His skin held a strange collection of faint scars, old ones, the kind that came from many years of hard living. He wore a pair of her father's old clothes, the ones she kept in a box in the hall closet, and he was drinking a cup of coffee, as if he had every right to be sitting in her kitchen at all. His eyes lifted to meet hers. They were gray, silver, almost, in the morning light. Elena's breath caught in her throat. "You're awake," the man said. His voice was low and rough, like something rarely used. "Good. I was starting to worry." "Who are you?" Elena managed to say, though her voice came out smaller than she wanted. "Where's the wolf?" "What did you do with the wolf that was here?" The man's mouth curved into something that was not quite a smile. "My name is Cale," he said, "and I owe you my life." Elena's mind raced, trying to make sense of what she was seeing, trying to find some explanation that made any logical sense at all. A man in her kitchen, a wolf missing from her living room, clothes from a closet he should have had no way of finding. None of it fit together, and yet, somehow, looking into those familiar silver eyes, a small and terrified part of her already understood exactly what had happened. "That's not possible," she whispered. "Most people would say the same thing," Cale said quietly, setting down his cup. "I don't expect you to believe me right away, but you saved my life last night, Elena Marsh, and I intend to make sure you understand exactly what it is you saved." Outside, somewhere in the trees beyond her house, a wolf howled in the distance, long and low, and Elena felt every hair on her arms rise at the sound. Whatever was happening, she understood in that moment. Her quiet life had just ended, and something far larger, far stranger, and far more dangerous had already begun. Elena did not move from the doorway for a long time. She simply stood there, staring at the man who called himself Cale, trying to find some crack in the impossible story her mind was building without her permission. "You expect me to believe you were the wolf," she said finally, "that you turned into a man while I was asleep." "I don't expect anything," Cale said. "I only ask that you keep an open mind for the next few minutes. After that, believe whatever you want." Elena crossed her arms, partly to steady her shaking hands, partly to put some kind of barrier between herself and this stranger, sitting so calmly in her kitchen. "Start talking then." Cale studied her for a moment, as if deciding how much truth she could handle. Then he set his coffee cup down and folded his hands on the table. "There are things in this world that most people never see," he said. "Not because those things are hiding, but because people are trained not to look for them. You saved a wolf from a river last night. That wolf was me. I do not expect you to understand how that is possible. I only need you to accept that it is true, because the wound on my side is still healing, and there are people looking for me who would be very interested to learn I am still alive." "People," Elena repeated. "What people?" "Enemies," Cale said simply. "The kind who tried to make sure I never left that river." Elena's mind flashed back to the wound she had cleaned the night before, the deep gash along his side that had looked far too clean, far too deliberate, to be the work of rocks in a raging current. She had told herself she was imagining things. Now, looking at the man in front of her, she was no longer sure. "Someone did that to you on purpose," she said slowly. "Yes. Why?" Cale's jaw tightened, and for the first time, something like real pain crossed his face. Not physical pain, but something older and deeper. "Because I lead a pack," he said. "A group of people like me, who share what I am. Leading a pack means someone is always waiting for the chance to take your place. Someone got that chance last night." Elena felt her legs go weak, and she lowered herself into the chair across from him, still keeping her eyes fixed on his face, still searching for any hint that this was some elaborate joke. "People like you," she said. "You mean there are more?" "Many more," Cale said. "Some good, some not. The ones who did this to me are the second kind." The kitchen fell silent, except for the ticking of the old clock on Elena's wall. Outside, birds sang, as if nothing in the world had changed, as if the sky had not just cracked open to reveal something Elena never imagined existed. "Prove it," she said finally, her voice steadier than she felt. "If what you're saying is true, prove it." Cale studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly, as if he had expected the request, and was only surprised it had taken her this long to make it. "Not here," he said. "Not in your house. If someone is watching, I would rather they not see what I am about to show you." "Someone watching," Elena repeated, her stomach tightening. "You think we're being watched right now?" I think it would be foolish to assume we are not, Cale said, rising from the table. His movements were smooth and controlled, though she noticed the careful way he favored his injured side. Is there somewhere private, somewhere surrounded by trees, away from the road? Elena hesitated only a moment before nodding. There's a clearing behind my house. My father used to take me there when I was young. Good, Cale said. Show me. They walked in silence through the trees behind Elena's house, the morning sun filtering down through the leaves in scattered patches of gold. Elena kept glancing at Cale from the corner of her eye, still half convinced she was dreaming, still waiting for some sign that none of this was real. But the man beside her moved with a quiet, careful strength that felt entirely too real, too solid, to be part of any dream. When they reached the clearing, a wide circle of grass, surrounded by tall pines, Cale stopped and turned to face her. Stay back a little, he said. This is not always a comfortable thing to watch. Elena took 2 steps back, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain he could hear it. Cale closed his eyes, drew a slow breath, and then something happened that Elena would spend the rest of her life trying to properly describe. His body did not simply change. It seemed to fold and reshape itself all at once, bones shifting beneath his skin, with a sound like cracking knuckles, fur sweeping across his arms and chest, in a wave that moved faster than her eyes could follow. Where a man had stood only a moment before, a massive gray wolf now stood in his place. The same wolf she had pulled from the river the night before, the same silver eyes watching her from an animal's face. Elena's hand flew to her mouth. She did not scream, though every instinct told her she should. Instead, she found herself simply staring, transfixed, as the wolf took a slow step toward her and lowered its great head, almost as if bowing. It's really you, she whispered. The wolf made a low sound in its throat, something that was almost an answer, and then, just as quickly as before, the shape shifted again, bones and fur rearranging themselves in reverse, until Cale stood before her once more, breathing hard from the effort. Now you understand, he said quietly. What you saved, what you're involved in now, whether you meant to be or not. Elena's legs finally gave out, and she sat down hard in the grass, staring up at him with wide eyes. This isn't possible, she said, though the words felt hollow even as she spoke them. This can't be real. I understand this is difficult, Cale said, kneeling in front of her, his voice gentler than before. But I need you to understand something else, Elena. The people who did this to me, the ones who tried to kill me in that river, they will not stop simply because I survived. If they learn I am alive, and if they learn you helped me, you will be in danger too. Elena looked up at him, her mind still spinning, but something in his words cut through the confusion and settled into cold, sharp fear. Danger from what? From who? Cale's expression darkened. My second in command, he said. A man named Owen, who I trusted with my life until 3 nights ago. He led the attack that put me in that river. He believes I am dead, and as long as he believes that, he will continue tearing apart everything I built, taking control of my pack piece by piece, until there is nothing left for me to reclaim. So reclaim it, Elena said, surprising herself with the steadiness in her voice. Go back and take it from him. It is not that simple, Cale said. I am still healing. Owen has had 3 days to secure loyalty, to convince others that I am gone, that following him is their only choice. If I go back now, weak and unprepared, I will only be giving him the chance to finish what he started. Elena wrapped her arms around her knees, trying to process everything she had just witnessed and everything she was being told. A world of wolves and stolen power, of betrayal and blood, had just opened up beneath her feet, and she had no idea how to close it again. What do you need from me? She asked quietly. Cale looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable in his silver eyes. Time, he said. A place to heal, a place to plan. And perhaps, if you are willing, someone I can trust. In a world that has taught me trust is a very dangerous thing to give. Elena thought of the quiet, simple life she had been living only a day before. Veterinary school. Long walks by the river. A future that had seemed, until yesterday, entirely predictable. She thought of the silver eyes that had looked into hers as she pulled a dying wolf from the water, and the strange, undeniable feeling that she had been meant to be there, in that storm, at that exact moment. Okay, she said finally. You can stay, but you're going to tell me everything, Cale. All of it. If I'm going to be part of this, I need to understand what I'm walking into. Something shifted in Cale's expression, relief mixed with something that looked almost like gratitude. All of it, he agreed, I promise. They stayed in the clearing a while longer, the morning sun climbing higher above them, and Cale began to tell her fragments of his world. He spoke of packs scattered across the mountains and forests, hidden from human eyes for generations, each with its own alpha, its own laws, its own delicate balance of power. He spoke of his own pack, built over 10 years of careful leadership, now hanging by a thread because of one man's hunger for control. Elena listened, asking questions when she did not understand, memorizing details she knew she would need later. It was strange, she thought, how quickly fear could turn into focus, how quickly the impossible could start to feel like simply another problem to solve. By the time they returned to her house, the sun had climbed high overhead, and Elena's mind was full of names and warnings and dangers she had never imagined, existing only a day before. Owen, the pack, the silent war being fought in the shadows of the mountains she had called home her entire life. That evening, as Elena prepared a simple dinner in her kitchen, she caught sight of Cale standing at her window, watching the tree line with the sharp, careful attention of a man who had learned, the hard way, that danger could appear from anywhere. Do you really think someone followed you here? She asked, setting 2 plates on the table. Cale did not turn from the window right away. I think it would be a mistake to assume we are safe, he said. Owen is thorough. If he suspects I survived, he will search every corner of these mountains, until he finds proof, one way or another. Elena felt a chill run down her spine, and she found herself glancing toward the window as well, searching the darkening tree line for any sign of movement. Then we should be ready, she said. Cale finally turned to look at her, something like respect flickering across his tired face. Yes, he said quietly, we should. Outside, the wind picked up again, rustling through the trees with a sound that, in the growing darkness, sounded almost like whispered voices, and somewhere far off in the mountains, a wolf howled long into the coming night. 3 days passed in careful, watchful quiet. Elena kept to her normal routine as much as she could, attending her classes at the small veterinary college in town, running errands, waving to neighbors as if her entire world had not just been turned upside down. But every evening she returned home to find Cale waiting, stronger each day, the wound on his side healing at a pace that still made her shake her head in disbelief. He spent those days teaching her, in fragments, about the world he came from. He told her about the different packs scattered through the mountains, each one guarding its own territory, its own secrets. He told her about the rules that held their world together, rules older than the town itself, rules that existed to prevent exactly the kind of chaos Owen was now creating. An alpha is chosen through strength and loyalty, Cale explained one evening, as Elena helped change the bandages on his healing wound. Not simply the strength to fight, but the strength to protect. Owen has always had the first kind of strength. I worried sometimes that he lacked the second. You trusted him anyway, Elena said. I did, Cale admitted, his voice heavy with something like regret. For 10 years, he stood beside me. I thought that meant something. Elena did not know how to answer that, so she simply focused on her work, tying off the last bandage with careful hands. She had grown more comfortable around Cale over these 3 days, though a part of her still felt the strange thrill of fear every time she remembered exactly what he was, what he could become in the space of a single breath. It was on the 4th night that everything changed again. Elena was in the kitchen, washing dishes after a quiet dinner, when she heard Cale go suddenly still in the living room. She turned to find him standing near the window, his body tense, his eyes fixed on something in the darkness outside. What is it? She whispered. Someone is here, Cale said quietly. More than one. I can feel them. Elena's heart began to pound. She set down the dish in her hands and moved toward him, peering out into the night, but she saw nothing except the familiar shapes of trees swaying in the evening breeze. Are you sure? She asked. Cale did not answer right away. Instead, he turned to her, his expression sharp and focused, in a way she had not seen since that first morning in her kitchen. Get away from the windows, he said. Now. Elena did not argue. She stepped back into the shadows of the room, her pulse hammering in her ears, as Cale moved toward the front door with slow, careful steps. He paused there, one hand resting against the wood, listening to something Elena could not hear. Then the door exploded inward. Elena screamed and stumbled backward as splinters of wood scattered across her living room floor. 3 figures stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the pale moonlight outside, and even in her panic, Elena could see enough to understand that these were not ordinary people. Their eyes caught the light in a strange, animal way, and the largest of the 3 stepped forward with the confident, predatory grace of someone who had never once doubted his own strength. "Cale," the man said, his voice low and mocking. "I have to admit, I did not expect to find you standing on 2 legs again so soon." Cale positioned himself between Elena and the intruders, his shoulders squared, his voice dangerously calm. "Owen," he said, "I wondered how long it would take you to come looking." Owen was tall, nearly as tall as Cale, with dark hair cut close to his scalp and a build that suggested years of physical training. His eyes swept across the room, lingering for a moment on Elena before returning to Cale with something like amusement. "A human," Owen said. "You always did have strange taste in allies, Cale, though I suppose I should thank her. If she had not pulled you from that river, I would have had to search much longer for the pleasure of finishing what I started." Elena's blood ran cold at the casual cruelty in his voice, but Cale did not so much as flinch. "You will not touch her," he said, his voice carrying a weight that made the 2 men flanking Owen shift uncomfortably. "Bold words for a man who cannot even stand at full strength," Owen said, though Elena noticed he did not move any closer. "But I did not come here tonight to fight you, Cale, not yet. I only came to see with my own eyes what everyone else refused to believe. Now that I know you live, I can plan accordingly." "Plan all you like," Cale said. "You took my pack through lies and betrayal. You will not keep it that way for long." Owen's expression darkened, the amusement draining from his face in an instant. "The pack is mine now," he said. "They have already chosen. You are nothing but a ghost, clinging to a life that no longer belongs to you." "We will see," Cale said quietly. For a long, tense moment, no one moved. Elena could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears, could feel the dangerous electricity crackling in the air between the 2 men. Then, without warning, Owen smiled, a cold, thin smile that did nothing to ease the fear twisting in Elena's stomach. "Rest while you can," Owen said, stepping back toward the shattered doorway. "Heal your wounds. Gather what allies you think remain loyal to you. When you are ready to challenge me properly, you know where to find me." He turned and walked out into the darkness, his 2 companions following close behind, and within moments, the night swallowed them whole, leaving nothing but the broken door and the ringing silence of the empty living room. Elena let out a breath she had not realized she was holding, her legs shaking so badly she had to grip the back of a chair to stay upright. "That was Owen," she said, though it was not really a question. "Yes," Cale said, his eyes still fixed on the darkness outside. "He knows I helped you. He threatened me." Cale turned to face her then, and for the first time since she had met him, she saw something close to fear in his silver eyes, though she understood, in that moment, that the fear was not for himself. "I am sorry," he said quietly. "I never meant to bring this danger into your home." Elena wrapped her arms around herself, trying to steady her racing thoughts. "You didn't bring it," she said. "I chose to pull you out of that river. I chose to let you stay here. If there's danger now, it's a danger I chose too." Cale studied her for a long moment, something unreadable passing behind his eyes. "Not many humans would say such a thing," he said. "Maybe not," Elena said. "But I'm not most humans, apparently, since I'm the one standing in a house with a broken door, talking to a man who turns into a wolf." A faint, tired smile touched the corner of Cale's mouth, the first real smile she had seen from him since the night she pulled him from the river. "No," he agreed. "You are certainly not." They spent the rest of that night boarding up the broken door as best they could, working in tense silence, both of them listening for any sign that Owen or his companions might return. When the work was finally finished, Elena sank onto her couch, exhaustion pulling at every part of her body, and Cale sat across from her, his expression grim and thoughtful. "I cannot stay here any longer," he said finally, "not if it means putting you in danger every night." Elena's head snapped up. "Where would you even go?" You said yourself you're not strong enough to challenge Owen yet. I have allies scattered through these mountains, Cale said. Members of my pack who I believe remained loyal, even after Owen's lies. If I can reach them, gather enough support, I may be able to challenge him properly, on terms that give me a real chance of winning. Then I'm coming with you, Elena said. Cale shook his head immediately. Absolutely not. What you saw tonight was Owen showing restraint. If you come with me into the mountains, into the heart of pack territory, you will be walking directly into far greater danger than anything you have faced so far. And if I stay here, Elena challenged, you just said yourself, Owen knows where I live. He knows I helped you. Do you really think staying behind keeps me any safer? Cale opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again, clearly seeing the truth in her words even as he hated to admit it. This is not a decision to make lightly, he said instead. The world I am asking you to step into does not forgive mistakes easily. I already stepped into it, Elena said quietly. The moment I jumped into that river. There's no going back to my old life now, is there? Cale was silent for a long moment, his silver eyes studying her with something that looked almost like sadness. No, he admitted finally. I do not believe there is. Elena nodded slowly, feeling the weight of that truth settle over her like a heavy blanket. Whatever fear still lived inside her, it was matched, now, by a strange and stubborn determination she had not expected to find in herself. She had saved this man's life once already. She was not about to let him walk into danger alone, not when she finally understood exactly what was at stake. Then we leave together, she said, tomorrow, at first light. Cale studied her for a long moment, and then, slowly, he nodded. Together, he agreed. Outside, the wind continued to howl through the broken doorway, carrying with it the distant, mournful sound of wolves calling to each other across the dark mountains, and Elena felt, for the first time, that she was no longer simply a bystander in this strange and dangerous story. She had chosen a side, and there was no turning back now. They left Elena's house before the sun had fully risen, walking a narrow trail that climbed steadily into the mountains behind the town. Elena carried a pack filled with supplies, food, water, bandages, and a small first aid kit she hoped they would not need. Cale walked ahead of her, his steps quiet and careful despite his size, his eyes constantly scanning the trees around them for any sign of danger. How far are these allies of yours? Elena asked, her breath coming in short bursts as the trail grew steeper. A half-day's walk, if we move quickly, Cale said without slowing. There is a hidden valley beyond the ridge ahead, protected on all sides by cliffs too steep for most to climb. My pack has used it as a safe place for generations. And you think your allies will still be there? Even after Owen took over? Cale was quiet for a moment before answering. I believe some will have remained loyal to the old ways, even under new leadership. Whether they will be willing to risk everything by helping me, that I cannot promise. Elena said nothing more, saving her breath for the climb, and they continued in silence as the morning sun rose higher above the peaks, casting long golden shadows across the trail. Around midday, they stopped to rest beside a small stream, and Elena took the opportunity to ask questions that had been building in her mind since the night before. Tell me about your pack, she said, sitting on a flat rock beside the water. The people who might still be loyal to you. Who are they? Cale's expression softened slightly as he considered the question. There is a woman named Grace, he said. She has served as my healer for many years, wise beyond her age, and fiercely loyal to those she trusts. If anyone remains willing to help me, it will be her. A healer, Elena repeated. Like a doctor? Something like that, Cale said. There is also a young man named Nathan, still new to the pack, but skilled in ways that have surprised even me, and an older man named Victor, who served as my second before Owen. Victor left the pack years ago after a disagreement, but I believe he still holds influence with many who remember the old days. So we're gathering an army, Elena said. Cale allowed a small, tired smile. Something more modest, I hope. Enough loyal voices to challenge Owen's claim, without breaking the pack apart entirely in the process. War between packs rarely ends well for anyone, human or not. Elena nodded slowly, absorbing this new piece of the puzzle, and they continued their journey as the afternoon sun began its slow descent toward the western peaks. It was nearly evening when they finally crested the ridge Cale had spoken of, and Elena caught her first glimpse of the hidden valley below. It was breathtaking. A wide green basin, surrounded by towering cliffs, a small river winding through its center, and scattered among the trees. She could just make out the shapes of simple wooden structures, homes, built with careful, patient hands. "This is it," Cale said quietly, his voice carrying a note of something like homesickness. "This is where I was born, where I became alpha, where everything I built stood, until 3 nights ago." Elena studied the valley below, trying to imagine the life Cale had led here before the storm had swept him into her world. "It's beautiful," she said. "It was," Cale agreed. "I intend to make certain it remains that way." They made their way down a narrow, winding path into the valley, moving carefully now, aware that any resident they encountered might not welcome their arrival. Elena found herself watching Cale closely, noticing the way his shoulders had tensed the moment they entered pack territory, the way his eyes moved constantly, searching for threats hidden among the peaceful scenery. They had not gone far when a figure stepped out from behind a large tree, blocking their path. Elena's heart jumped into her throat, but Cale relaxed almost immediately, a look of genuine relief crossing his tired face. "Grace," he said. The woman standing before them was older than Elena had expected, perhaps in her 50s, with silver streaked through her dark hair and sharp, intelligent eyes that studied Cale with open disbelief. "It cannot be," Grace whispered, stepping closer, her hand rising to cover her mouth. "We were told you were dead. Owen said the river took you, that there was nothing left to find." "Owen lied," Cale said simply. "As I suspect you already knew, or else you would not be standing guard on this path, watching for exactly the kind of miracle you are looking at right now." Grace's eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, Elena watched the older woman struggle to compose herself, before finally stepping forward and embracing Cale tightly. "I hoped," she admitted, her voice thick with emotion. "I hoped, but I did not dare believe." "I need your help, Grace," Cale said, gently pulling back to look at her. "Owen has already claimed leadership. If I am to challenge him, I will need every loyal voice I can find." Grace's expression turned serious, years of worry etching lines across her face. "It will not be easy," she warned. "Owen has spent these 3 days building loyalty through fear as much as promises. Many who might once have supported you are now too frightened to speak against him." "Then we will need to remind them what real leadership looks like," Cale said quietly. Grace's gaze shifted to Elena for the first time, curiosity and caution mixing in her expression. "And who is this?" "This is Elena," Cale said. "She pulled me from the river. Without her, I would not be standing here at all." Grace studied Elena for a long, careful moment, and Elena felt herself standing a little straighter under the older woman's sharp gaze. "A human," Grace said finally, though there was no hostility in her voice, only surprise. "Interesting. The old stories speak of such bonds, though I confess I never expected to witness one myself." "Old stories?" Elena asked, curiosity overtaking her nervousness. "Later," Cale said gently, placing a hand briefly on Elena's shoulder. "For now, we need to focus on what comes next." Grace nodded, understanding the urgency in his voice. "Come," she said. "There is a hidden cabin not far from here, one Owen's people rarely patrol. We can speak safely there, and I will send word to Nathan and to Victor. If your allies are to be gathered, it must be done carefully and quickly." They followed Grace deeper into the valley, moving along paths hidden beneath heavy tree cover, until they reached a small, weathered cabin tucked into a fold of the hillside. Inside, Grace lit a small fire and began preparing tea, while Cale and Elena settled onto worn wooden chairs, exhaustion from the long day's travel finally catching up with both of them. "Tell me everything," Cale said, once Grace had finished her preparations. "What has Owen done since I have been gone? How deep does his control run?" Grace's expression grew heavy as she began to explain the events of the past 3 days. Owen had wasted no time consolidating power, she explained, using a mixture of persuasive promises and quiet threats to secure the loyalty of pack members who might otherwise have questioned his sudden rise to leadership. Those who spoke too openly against him had found themselves quietly pushed to the edges of pack life, their opinions no longer welcome, their voices effectively silenced. He has not yet resorted to open violence against his own people, Grace said carefully. But there is a coldness in him now that was not there before. I fear what he might become, if he is allowed to remain in power long enough to grow comfortable with it. Cale's jaw tightened as he listened, and Elena could see the weight of guilt settling over him. Guilt for the suffering his absence had allowed to unfold, even though none of it had truly been his fault. We will fix this, Elena said quietly, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice. Whatever it takes. Cale looked at her, something like gratitude flickering in his tired eyes, and Grace studied the exchange between them, with quiet, knowing interest, though she said nothing more about it for the moment. As the evening wore on, Grace sent quiet messages through trusted channels, reaching out to Nathan and to Victor, asking them to make their way to the hidden cabin, under cover of darkness. Elena helped where she could, though mostly she simply listened, absorbing every detail of this strange new world, trying to understand the rules and dangers that would determine whether Cale survived the coming days. It was well past midnight when a soft knock finally sounded at the cabin door, and Grace rose to answer it, her hand resting cautiously on the frame before she pulled it open, to reveal a young man standing in the moonlight, his expression a mixture of disbelief and cautious hope. "Nathan," Cale said, rising from his chair. The young man's eyes widened, and for a moment he simply stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the alpha he had believed dead. Then, slowly, he stepped inside and dropped to one knee, a gesture of respect that made Elena's chest tighten with the weight of everything unfolding around her. "I never believed the stories," Nathan said quietly. "I never believed you were truly gone." "Rise," Cale said gently. "There is much to discuss, and precious little time to discuss it in." As Nathan settled into a chair beside the fire, Elena found herself studying the young man's face, searching for any sign of the loyalty Cale was counting on. What she saw instead was something rawer than simple loyalty, a fierce and desperate hope that perhaps, finally, things could be set right again. The night stretched on as plans began to take shape, quiet voices weaving together strategies and warnings, hopes and fears, all building toward a confrontation that Elena understood, with growing certainty, was now impossible to avoid. Victor arrived just before dawn, moving through the trees with the quiet confidence of a man who had spent decades learning every hidden path in these mountains. He was older than Cale, his hair fully gray now, his face marked with the kind of lines that came from years of hard decisions rather than simple age. When he stepped into the cabin and saw Cale sitting by the dying fire, he stopped completely still, his sharp eyes narrowing with disbelief. "They told me you drowned," Victor said finally, his voice rough with emotion he clearly did not enjoy showing. "I stood at the edge of that river myself, and watched them search for your body." "They did not find one," Cale said quietly, "because there was none to find." Victor crossed the room in a few quick strides and gripped Cale's shoulder, a gesture that carried more weight than any words could have managed. "I should have known Owen was lying," he said. "I should have gone looking myself instead of trusting his account." "You could not have known," Cale said. "Owen has always been convincing when it suited him." Victor released his grip and stepped back, his expression hardening into something more calculating. "What do you need from me?" "Support," Cale said simply. "Voices willing to stand against Owen when the moment comes. You left the pack years ago, but you are still remembered, still respected. If you speak in my favor, others will listen." Victor was silent for a long moment, his gaze shifting briefly to Elena, taking in her presence with the same careful curiosity Grace had shown the night before returning his focus to Cale. "You understand what you are asking," he said. "A direct challenge to Owen's leadership will not end quietly. He has built loyalty through fear these past days. He will not surrender that power easily, no matter how many voices rise against him." "I understand," Cale said. "But allowing him to continue building that fear only makes the eventual confrontation more dangerous for everyone. Better to face this now, while there is still a pack worth saving." Victor considered this for a long moment before finally nodding, slow and deliberate. "Then you have my support," he said, "for whatever it is worth these days." "It is worth a great deal," Cale said. "Thank you, old friend." As the morning light began filtering through the cabin's small windows, the group settled into serious planning. Grace, Nathan, and Victor, each offering insight into Owen's current strength, the loyalty he had managed to secure, and the members of the pack who might still be persuaded to stand against him. Elena listened carefully, memorizing names and details, though she understood that much of this world's politics remained beyond her full understanding. "There is a gathering planned for tomorrow evening," Grace explained. "Owen intends to formally claim leadership before the full pack, a ceremony meant to seal his position permanently. If Cale intends to challenge him, it must happen there, before that ceremony concludes." "A public challenge," Victor said thoughtfully. "Bold, but it removes any question of legitimacy once the matter is settled. The pack will see with their own eyes who truly deserves to lead." "It is also extremely dangerous," Nathan said quietly, glancing toward Cale with obvious concern. "You are still healing. Owen will be at full strength." "I am aware of the risk," Cale said, "but allowing him more time only strengthens his position further. We move tomorrow, or we may not get another chance." Elena felt her stomach tighten at the casual way Cale discussed the danger ahead, as if the possibility of serious harm, even death, was simply another factor to be calculated rather than feared. She wanted to argue, to insist there had to be some safer path forward, but she understood, watching the resolve in his silver eyes, that this decision had already been made, and nothing she said would change it. The rest of the day passed in careful preparation. Grace worked to treat what remained of Cale's healing wound, using herbs and remedies Elena did not recognize but watched with fascinated attention, filing away details in case they proved useful later. Nathan and Victor left periodically to quietly gauge the mood among other pack members, testing carefully who might be willing to support Cale's return without alerting Owen's loyal followers to the plan taking shape. Elena found herself, in the quiet moments between preparations, walking with Cale along the edge of the hidden valley, both of them needing a brief escape from the tension building inside the small cabin. "You could still choose a different path," Elena said, as they walked beside the narrow river winding through the valley floor. "There might be another way to reclaim your position, something that doesn't put you directly in front of Owen again so soon." Cale was quiet for a moment before answering. "In our world, leadership is not simply claimed through words or clever plans," he said. "It is proven through strength and through the willingness to stand and defend what matters, even when the odds are uncertain. If I hide from this challenge, if I wait until I feel perfectly safe, I will never truly reclaim what Owen has taken. The pack will always wonder if I am strong enough to protect them." "And if you lose?" Elena asked quietly, voicing the fear she had been carrying since the night before. Cale stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression softening in a way she had not seen before. "Then at least I will have tried to set things right," he said. "Rather than allowing fear to hand my pack over to a man who does not deserve to lead them." Elena studied his face for a long moment, searching for any trace of doubt beneath the calm resolve, and finding none. "You really believe you can win," she said. "I believe I have reasons worth fighting for," Cale said quietly, his eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "My pack, my people, and, if I am honest, the strange and unexpected gift of your friendship, which I did not expect to find on the other side of that river." Elena felt her cheeks warm despite the seriousness of their conversation, and for a moment, neither of them spoke, the quiet sound of the river filling the silence between them. "Whatever happens tomorrow," Elena said finally, "I'm staying by your side. I didn't pull you out of that water just to watch you walk into danger alone now." Cale's expression softened further, something warm and grateful shining in his silver eyes. "Then I am fortunate indeed," he said quietly, "to have found someone willing to stand beside me, even in a world so far removed from her own." They returned to the cabin as evening began to settle over the valley, the weight of tomorrow's confrontation hanging heavily over both of them, though neither spoke of it further that night. Instead, they sat together by the fire, listening, as Grace, Nathan, and Victor finalized the details of their plan, each voice steady, despite the uncertainty ahead. As the fire burned low and the others eventually settled into uneasy sleep, Elena remained awake, watching the flickering shadows dance across the cabin walls, her mind turning over everything she had learned in these past few days. A world hidden beneath her own, full of danger and loyalty and ancient rules she was only beginning to understand. A man who had become, in the span of a few short days, someone she could not imagine simply walking away from, regardless of what tomorrow might bring. Beside her, Cale finally allowed himself to close his eyes, his breathing slow and steady in the quiet cabin, and Elena found herself watching him for a long moment, memorizing the details of his face, before finally allowing her own exhaustion to pull her toward a restless, dream-filled sleep. Tomorrow, she knew, everything would change again, one way or another. And for the first time since pulling a dying wolf from a raging river, Elena found herself unsure whether she was ready to face what came next. The gathering place lay in a wide clearing near the center of the valley, ringed by tall stones that Elena guessed had stood there for generations, worn smooth by weather and time. By the time evening fell and the pack began to assemble, dozens of people had gathered beneath the darkening sky, their faces lit by torches placed around the clearing's edge. Elena stayed close to Grace at the back of the crowd, her heart pounding as she watched Owen step forward onto a raised platform of flat stones, his posture confident, his expression carrying the easy authority of a man who believed his position was already secure. "Tonight," Owen announced, his voice carrying clearly across the clearing, "we gather to confirm what many of you already know in your hearts. Our former alpha is gone, lost to us through tragedy none of us wished for. It falls to me now to guide this pack forward, to ensure our strength and our safety in the days ahead." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some nodding in solemn agreement, others exchanging uncertain glances that suggested not everyone had fully accepted Owen's version of events. Elena scanned the gathered faces, searching for any sign of doubt she might use to her advantage, though she understood this was not truly her fight to lead. "I ask for your support," Owen continued, "not because tradition demands it, but because I have already proven my willingness to protect this pack, to make the difficult decisions our former alpha too often hesitated to make." It was in that moment, as murmurs of agreement began building among the crowd, that Cale stepped out from between the trees at the clearing's edge, his presence immediately drawing every eye in the gathering. The clearing fell into stunned silence. "Difficult decisions," Cale said, his voice calm but carrying easily across the sudden quiet, "such as leaving your alpha for dead in a raging river, rather than risk your own safety confirming the truth?" Owen's confident expression faltered for only a moment, before hardening into something colder. "You survived," he said, his voice tight with barely controlled fury. "How unfortunate for both of us." "Unfortunate for you, perhaps," Cale said, moving steadily through the parting crowd toward the raised platform. "For me, it is simply an opportunity to reclaim what was taken through lies and cowardice." Whispers erupted through the gathered pack, disbelief and hope mixing together, as more and more faces turned toward Cale, recognition and relief spreading visibly among many of them. Elena watched Owen's expression carefully, noting the flicker of genuine fear beneath his forced composure. "You are still weak," Owen said, though his voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. "Even now, I can see it. You cannot truly believe you are prepared to challenge me." "I believe," Cale said, stopping at the base of the platform, "that this pack deserves a leader who tells them the truth, rather than one who builds his position on convenient lies. I challenge your claim, Owen, here and now, before everyone gathered to witness it." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Elena did not fully understand, but recognized as significant from the way the crowd reacted. A mixture of gasps and murmured approval rippling through the gathering. Owen's jaw tightened, and for a long moment, Elena thought he might refuse, might try to find some clever way to avoid the confrontation entirely. But pride, or perhaps the knowledge that refusing now would only confirm every doubt already forming among his followers, finally won out. "Very well," Owen said, stepping down from the platform. "If you insist on embarrassing yourself in front of everyone you once led, I will not deny you the opportunity." The crowd quickly formed a wide circle around the two men, torchlight flickering across tense, expectant faces. Elena found herself pushed toward the front of the gathering, close enough to see every detail of what was about to unfold, her heart pounding so hard she felt certain everyone around her could hear it. Grace appeared at her side, placing a steadying hand on her arm. "Whatever happens," the older woman said quietly, "trust that Cale understands what he is doing." Elena nodded, though her eyes remained fixed on the clearing, where Cale and Owen now stood facing each other, several feet of open space between them, both men's postures shifting into something more predatory, more ready. Without warning, Owen's shape began to change, bones shifting and fur sweeping across his body in the same impossible transformation Elena had witnessed once before. Where a man had stood, a massive black wolf now crouched, larger even than Cale had been, muscles rippling beneath dark fur as he prepared to attack. Cale's own transformation followed a heartbeat later, his gray form emerging with the same fluid, impossible grace, and the two enormous wolves circled each other slowly, tension crackling through the air like electricity before a storm. Owen struck first, lunging forward with startling speed, and Elena's breath caught as Cale twisted aside just in time, avoiding the worst of the attack, though Owen's claws still caught his shoulder, drawing a sharp sound of pain from deep in his throat. The crowd gasped collectively, and Elena felt her own hands clench into fists at her sides, every instinct screaming at her to do something, though she understood there was nothing she could do except watch. Cale recovered quickly, spinning to face Owen again, and this time it was Cale who struck first, a swift, precise movement that sent Owen stumbling backward with a pained snarl. The two wolves circled again, more cautious now, both clearly understanding that this fight would not be decided quickly or easily. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as the two alphas exchanged careful, calculated attacks, each testing the other's remaining strength, each searching for the smallest opening that might turn the tide decisively. Elena watched, her heart in her throat, as Cale's earlier injury clearly slowed him, a fact Owen seemed determined to exploit, aiming his attacks again and again toward the same weakened side. "He's going to lose," Elena whispered, unable to stop the words from escaping. "Have faith," Grace said quietly beside her, though Elena could hear the same fear echoed in the older woman's voice. As if hearing her doubt, Cale suddenly shifted his strategy, feinting toward Owen's left, before pivoting sharply and catching the larger wolf off guard, driving him backward with a burst of speed that seemed to defy his earlier exhaustion. Owen stumbled, momentarily losing his balance, and Cale pressed the advantage immediately, pinning his opponent with a decisive, controlled show of strength that left no question about the outcome. The clearing fell utterly silent as Owen, defeated, lay still beneath Cale's hold, both wolves breathing hard, exhaustion evident in every trembling muscle. For a long moment, nothing moved, the entire gathering holding its breath as they waited to see what their true alpha would choose to do with his defeated rival. Slowly, Cale stepped back, releasing Owen from his hold, and both wolves shifted back into human form, kneeling in the torchlit clearing, chests heaving from the effort of the fight. "You are defeated," Cale said, his voice rough with exhaustion, but carrying clearly across the silent crowd. "According to our laws, your challenge has failed, and your claim to leadership ends here." Owen remained kneeling, his earlier confidence completely stripped away, replaced by something that looked almost like shame. "What will you do with me?" he asked quietly. Cale studied him for a long moment, and Elena held her breath, uncertain what judgment he might deliver, uncertain what mercy, if any, existed in this world's harsh rules. "You will leave this pack," Cale said finally. "You will find your own path elsewhere, far from these mountains, and you will never again attempt to claim leadership through lies or betrayal. This pack has no place for those who would sacrifice loyalty for personal gain." Owen's shoulders sagged with something between relief and defeat, and he nodded slowly, accepting the judgment without argument. Around the clearing, the gathered pack members began to relax, tension slowly draining from the crowd as they watched their true alpha, wounded but victorious, rise slowly to his feet. Elena rushed forward before she could stop herself, reaching Cale's side just as his legs began to buckle from exhaustion. She caught him, bracing his weight against her own body, and he leaned into her support gratefully, his breathing still ragged from the fight. "You did it," she whispered. "We did it," Cale corrected quietly, his silver eyes finding hers even through his obvious exhaustion. "I could not have reached this moment without you, Elena." Around them, the pack began to cheer, voices rising in celebration, as word spread quickly through the gathered crowd that their true alpha had returned, that the danger threatening their community had finally been resolved. Elena felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, relief and exhaustion, and something warmer, something she was only beginning to understand, all mixing together as she helped support Cale's weight through the celebrating crowd. Whatever strange and impossible journey had brought her to this moment, Standing in a hidden valley surrounded by wolves and torchlight and the sound of genuine celebration, Elena understood, with a certainty that surprised her, that she would not have changed a single choice that led her here. In the weeks that followed, life in the hidden valley began to settle into a new, steadier rhythm. Cale's leadership, once again secure, brought a sense of calm back to the pack that had been missing since the night of his betrayal. Grace's careful care helped his remaining injuries heal fully, and slowly, the exhaustion that had lingered in his eyes since that first stormy night began to fade, replaced by the quiet confidence Elena imagined had once defined him, before everything went wrong. Owen left the valley within days of his defeat, disappearing into the wider mountains without another word, and though some pack members occasionally wondered aloud what had become of him, most seemed content to leave the matter firmly in the past, grateful simply that peace had been restored. Elena found herself dividing her time between her old life in town, continuing her veterinary studies as best she could, and the hidden valley that had become, in ways she was still learning to understand, something close to a second home. Grace had taken a particular interest in teaching her about the pack's history, the old stories Elena had heard mentioned that first day in the valley, tales of humans and pack members forming bonds that lasted lifetimes, bonds built on trust, earned through moments exactly like the one that had first brought Elena and Cale together. The old stories say such bonds are rare, Grace told her one afternoon, as they walked together along the valley's winding river. Rarer still are the ones strong enough to survive the kind of danger you and Cale faced together. What happens to people who share these bonds? Elena asked, curious despite herself. Grace's expression grew thoughtful. That depends entirely on the two people involved, she said. Some simply remain close friends, allies for life. Others discover something deeper grows between them, given enough time and enough trust. Elena felt her cheeks warm slightly at the older woman's knowing look, though she said nothing more on the subject, unsure herself exactly what was growing between her and the alpha whose life she had saved. She did not have to wonder for very long. It was on a quiet evening, several weeks after Owen's defeat, that Cale found her sitting alone beside the same clearing where he had first shown her the truth of what he was. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and gold, and Elena looked up as he approached, settling down beside her without a word. "The pack is thriving again," she said after a comfortable silence. "You should be proud of what you've rebuilt." "We rebuilt it," Cale corrected gently, echoing the words he had spoken to her the night of his victory. "None of this would have been possible without you, Elena. Not the healing, not the challenge, not the peace we have found since." Elena turned to look at him, studying the sincerity in his silver eyes, eyes that no longer held the exhaustion and fear she had first seen reflected in them that stormy night by the river. "I only did what felt right," she said. "I couldn't just leave you there to die. And I will be grateful for that choice for the rest of my life," Cale said quietly. "But I find myself wondering, now that the danger has passed, whether you might consider staying here permanently. Not simply visiting between your studies in town, but truly becoming part of this life, part of this pack." Elena's heart skipped at the question, though she found, somewhat to her own surprise, that the idea did not frighten her the way it might have weeks earlier. "You're asking me to leave my old life behind," she said slowly. "I am asking," Cale said carefully, "whether the life you have found here might be one worth choosing, difficulties and all. I understand it is not a small request. This world comes with dangers your old life never held. It also comes with something my old life never held either," Elena said quietly, surprising herself with the honesty in her own voice. "Purpose, connection, you." Cale's expression softened into something warm and hopeful, and he reached out slowly, taking her hand in his own, with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with the raw strength she had witnessed in him during his fight with Owen. "Then perhaps," he said softly, "we might build something new together. A life that honors both the world you came from and the one you saved me from losing forever." Elena smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the fading evening sun. "I'd like that," she said. "Very much." They sat together in comfortable silence as the sun finally disappeared behind the peaks, the first stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky above the valley that had become, for both of them, a true home. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, long and clear, No longer a sound of danger or warning, but simply the peaceful voice of a pack finally, fully at rest. In the months that followed, Elena split her time carefully between her studies and the valley, slowly weaving the two halves of her life together, in ways that felt, more and more, entirely natural. She continued learning the old stories from Grace, continued training alongside Nathan, who had grown into a trusted and capable presence within the pack's inner circle, and continued building a quiet, steady partnership with Victor, whose wisdom proved invaluable, as Cale worked to strengthen the bonds Owen's betrayal had once threatened to break. Cale, for his part, ruled with a renewed sense of purpose, his leadership tempered now by the understanding of exactly how fragile trust and loyalty could be, and exactly how precious they were once earned back. The pack flourished under his guidance, growing stronger not through fear, as Owen had once attempted, but through the same careful balance of strength and compassion that had first drawn Elena to trust him, even as a stranger sitting uninvited in her kitchen. 1 year after the night she had first pulled a dying wolf from a raging river, Elena stood once again in the clearing, where everything between them had truly begun, watching as Cale addressed the full gathered pack beneath a clear evening sky. This time, there was no challenge to answer, no danger threatening the peace they had all worked so hard to rebuild. There was only celebration, gratitude, and the quiet, powerful bond between an alpha once feared and left for dead, and the human who had refused to let him die. As the celebration continued around them, torches glowing warmly against the darkening sky, Cale found his way back to Elena's side, taking her hand in his own, with the same quiet certainty he had shown that very first morning. "No regrets?" he asked softly, echoing a question she had once asked him. Elena smiled, looking out over the valley that had become her home, at the pack that had become her family, and at the man beside her whose life she had saved without ever imagining where that single choice would lead. "None at all," she said. "I'd jump into that river again in a heartbeat." Cale's answering smile held all the warmth of a man who had once been the most feared alpha alive, now finally, completely at peace, with the woman who had saved him standing steady and unshaken by his side, ready to face whatever future still awaited them both, together.